Hello and welcome to another episode of Arena FPS podcast. This week we're joined by the wonderful Winters. Is that how you say it? Winters?
Yes.
Okay, and you're involved with the hashtag Rect project, so do you want to just introduce yourself and talk about Rect for a minute or two?
Sure. A lot of the people who are into esports and stuff may know about Winners with the One. I've been doing casting for years with the Independent Broadcast Network and Tribescast and several other casting communities, and now I'm part of the project that is going on called hashtag Rect. It's the hot new arena shooter that everybody is talking about, and it is from Hell Legit Games, and we have a playable version. We're one of the first games to come out in a playable form on the Unreal Engine 4, and we're still a work in progress, very much so, and heading towards Steam Greenlight very soon. And we're here to talk about arena shooters, because that's what Arena FPS is all about.
Brilliant. So shall we start off by having a bit of a chat about... Oh, Oni Pulse here as well. Just you want to say hello, Oni Pulse?
Hi guys.
Yeah, don't want to forget.
I'm also here. I have no credentials.
No credentials. We're just guys who sit and talk about things. So do you want to, take a few minutes to talk about what games you've been playing this week? Specifically arena shooter games, not just anything. Although if you want to talk about anything, that's fine too, but not quite as...
Well, I initially planned to sort of hold off on Reflex a bit until they put in some CTF, but I've actually been playing loads of that, mostly with you. Just doing duels and stuff, and that's been a lot of fun. I did some 2v2 today. I can't get Wickland working anymore, so I haven't been playing that much, but I would.
You can't get it working?
If I could. No, I've got some horrible bug that the developers can't seem to fix, and none of the big players can seem to fix, and it's been the bane of my existence for the last week.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No. Reflex and then pining for Wickland, that's been me this week.
Are you sure you've not missed a few things out, like Robot Roller Derby?
Oh, yes, no, I have played. Yeah, I played Roller Rover Derby.
That's quite a fun
Oh,
game.
the Disco Dodgeball.
Yeah.
Yes. What a great little game.
That is very fun.
It's really fun, because every single shot on that game, regardless of how good it actually was, makes you feel like a king.
Yeah,
I think the developer of that is about to do, if this week, if I'm not mistaken, the actual full release of the game. And it's been sort of, I guess, in beta for a while, but it's a fully working beta, and we've had a lot of fun playing it. That's a very overlooked game, I think. It could definitely use more love from people, because it's simple and it's silly, and there are a lot of different game modes, and I don't know, it's just one of those pop in and have a good time with your friends kind of games.
It reminds me of Rats Instagib, but with kind of rockets, but not rockets, if that makes sense.
How is the new Rats Instagib? Because I remember the old version, I want to say you could play in a browser.
Yeah.
And
It's
see,
good.
I'm one of those weirdos that inverts the mouse. I'm going to out myself right here on this podcast. And you couldn't invert the mouse, but I'm told that you can now.
Yeah, you
That's
can.
like the Arena FPS version of being left-handed.
I thought everyone used to play with inverted mouse. I used to until maybe about 3 years ago, and I was just like, no, I'm going to retrain myself.
No, I can't. My brain can't function like that. Maybe I haven't played enough flight simulators either.
Yeah, I think that was my problem. I was used to flying games where you push up to go down and vice versa. But yeah, I'm very interested in Rats Instagib. But I don't know. That seems to be a holy war of arena shooter people too, whether Instagib is okay or not. And I always loved it. Whether it's Freeze Tag and Quake or UT99, we played a lot of Instagib. But I see people talk about things like Warsaw now, and they'll be like, well, all anybody plays is Instagib. It's like, well, that sounds pleasant to me.
I think
I'm not even a fan of Instagib, and I thought that Rats was really good fun.
Rats
I
has a
had
lot of
tons fun in it.
personality. It's quite similar to Robot Roller Derby Disco. Oh my god, that's hard to
Disco
say.
Dodgeball, yeah. It's
Disco
very
Dodgeball.
helpful.
They're similar in the they're designed just to be fun and to have a good time in, and not kind of be like the holy grail of like competitive arena shooters. And I don't think every arena shooter has to be the most competitive, hardcore, balls to the walls game ever designed. Games are meant to be fun, right? I mean, that's why we play them.
They are. Well, I mean, there's a debate in the community about whether games are supposed to be fun or not. Now, I guess there's a debate in the community about just about everything that you could possibly be contentious about, though.
Yeah. Anything else, Neepal, before we move on to...
No, that covers me, I think.
What about you, Mr. Winters? What have you been playing?
Oh, what about... I probably shouldn't even say the kind of games I've been playing, because I'll immediately lose my credibility as a game dev, but...
Is it dating simulators?
Hatful boyfriend.
I have been getting into some of the VNs that have come out, and some of the JRPGs and things like that I've had very little experience with, but they're interesting from a storytelling perspective, I suppose. But yeah, I still I like to sneak in a little bit of Quake 3 Arena, and my favorite was always Return to Castle Wolfenstein. That's where I started playing professionally, I suppose, as a pro gamer. And the bots that John Dean made for that Fritz bot are fantastic. So it's nice to just pop in and let them do their thing.
Cool. I mean, I think it's quite good to play a really wide range of games, just especially as a developer, because then you get kind of inspiration drawn from different types of games. Because I think like things like narrative, they still have a place in arena shooters. Like even if the narrative's in a completely different paradigm to how we see it in an RPG, it's creating a strong kind of feeling around the game. Definitely benefits it. And there are two things that Quake and Unreal Tournament did really well. Like we had the gnarly war cows, and we had like it's Scar. Is that how you pronounce it?
I think so.
And then Quake had the kind of whole gothic, kind of cyber gothic kind of feeling. And I think that's something to keep in mind as a developer, or anyone who's playing games. Kind of narrative is important. It's not just all about killing things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it gives some sort, because some people love lore.
Yeah, definitely.
We found that out. So we have a very rich lore behind #Rect.
Oh, that's great. I think that's something that a lot of the new games being developed is kind of lacking, and it'd be good to see a bit more on that front. Anything else you've been playing this week?
Me? No, I've been looking at a lot of things, so I was interested to get a look at Telos yesterday on the stream, on Jahar's Tasty Spleen stream from FadeCon, and it looks amazing. It's almost like a six-off, but with arena and CTF elements to it.
Yeah, it looks so cool when it's in an actual game. Like I've had a little run around in the alpha, but by myself because I've missed all the playtests. But the actual, when you see it in combat and people capping flags and stealing flags and stuff like that, it's such a cool game.
Yeah, I missed that stream, but I'm really interested in catching up on the VOD and having a look at what they're doing with it. Because is there like some kind of web slinging type element, or have I made that up?
Yeah, no,
like a grappling hook.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a melee weapon that's got like a mini teleporter on it, and there's charged jumps and boosts and zero gravity, and there's all sorts.
Had a lot of fun in, don't know if any of you guys have played Jedi Knight Academy, and there was a mod for that called JA+, and that had a grappling hook, and I spent hours just grappling around and pinging around.
Those Jedi Knight games were so good anyway.
Yeah, they really were. That's kind of the best lightsaber combat simulator I've ever played, really. Well, in a multiplayer facility, anyway.
I've seen people try to come up with things that have that similar aesthetic. I think there's one called Blade Symphony. That is obviously kind of patterned on that, but yeah, it's hard to top just the feel of what they achieved in the Jedi Knight games, the Jedi Academy, and
yeah, I think the animation quality was top notch, so there's a lot of weight behind all the different movements. And I guess, was that an arena shooter, technically? I mean,
I would say technically it was, yes.
It had live pickups.
You could use a Wookiee bowcaster or a blaster if you didn't want to saber fight. It's just people kind of settled on that. You know, there was the whole honorable thing where you bow to each other before you fight and all that. But, you know, yeah, you could laser fight in the hallways if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Someone posted about Republic Commando on the Arena FPS sub.
Okay.
Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
It's like another Star Wars game, but it's kind of like UT, and there's like a little community that still plays it. I think in American servers.
Okay, that'll be worth checking out.
It looked pretty cool.
Oh, we got some news on Battlefront this week as well, and I mean that is stretching it as far as arena shooters, because that'll be 64-player sprawling maps similar to your Battlefield, but it's you know along those lines, you know, with vehicles and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean the genre is not very well defined, but I think any kind of different shooter to Call of Duty and what's it called? What's that one? Counter-Strike, I think, kind of has a bit of a, what's the word? An element of something a little bit different and nice and fun.
Yeah, have you guys played Toxic yet? Some of the guys on the team have been playing it.
Yeah,
I guess they added a new map. And
I've not played the new map yet, but we did a review of the very first patch, and it was a little bit shaky, but they improved on a lot of the things we grumbled about a lot, and it's looking a lot better now.
Okay,
Yeah,
I was curious.
I quite like it. I was iffy on the fact that it was going to be dodging, but the dodge is like massive, and you got quite a lot of air control on them and stuff, so you don't feel too hindered by the movement. It was quite a fun game.
Yeah. So just move on to what I've been playing. One of them was UT. I played a bit of UT, the new one, this week.
Oh, I thought you said ET for a minute.
No, unfortunately, I don't have an Atari around.
An Atari game or something.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, there's a lot of things that game's doing right, but the movement, it just feels like you're kind of chained down to the ground after playing all these other games, and it's doing my head in a little bit. I much prefer
feels like you're fighting against shackles.
Yeah.
It's not freeing or liberating. It's quite a struggle.
And Toxic's very similar, but it has a much more free movement system, and it's a lot more kind of like fun because of it. I know a lot of the UT guys adore UT99 movement, and it was a fun game, but after playing other games, I tend to find it a little bit too restrictive for my tastes.
Yeah, that's a hard medium ground to strike, I think, because that's something we're really trying to stress in #Rect as a freedom of movement. And, you know, we have something that is similar to a jetpack. It's the no grav, the grav belt, you know, that kind of lets you turn off gravity so you have a little bit more air control. And also you can kind of run along the walls, and you can do some things that they're not really meant to be, you know, in and of themselves pieces of movement. It's meant to just kind of give you a larger whole of being able to just kind of not lose momentum and really get up speed and move around, rather than just flying everywhere with a jetpack or parkouring or so forth. It's a very organic feel, and we've been really working to refine that, and I think that's one of the things one of the questions I get a lot is, why should we play your game over other games? I think that's really what sets our game apart, what we're really trying to make set our game apart most of all.
Okay, sounds good. I mean, there's always... Movement's a difficult one. You've got to really think about your weapon set when you're doing movement. I mean, UT movement wouldn't suit Quake weapons, and Quake weapons wouldn't suit UT movement, if that makes sense. Did I say that right?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, because we've tried with different speeds and stuff, and there were times when, okay, we're just going too fast because you can't really hit anybody moving this fast, and so yeah, a lot of it does come down to your weapons, to the kind of maps that you have, and yeah, it is sort of putting it all together to make a full product it's fun, but it's challenging.
Mm-hmm. So shall we... I don't think there's anything else I've played this week which is applicable. So shall we move on to the topic of the day, or the topic of the week, or the topic of whatever? The topic. Neeple, introduce the topic.
Okay, so the topic would be how can the genre as a whole, I suppose, and the upcoming games appeal to the wider audience, as in the people that aren't already in our beautiful little Arena FPS bubble.
Yeah, so to give this a bit of context, both Neeple and I posted in PC Gaming, and you posted in r/games on Reddit. And
yeah, that was a great thread, by the way. That generated some good discussion.
Yeah, it was really interesting seeing like the responses of like the people who weren't as invested in the genre of Arena FPS, seeing what they wanted to get out of the games. So we're gonna today discuss kind of like some of their responses and our thoughts about them. So should we start off with payment models?
Yeah, so the default thing everyone wants to say with payment models is, you know, just you want more people playing the game, just go free to play. But that's not always viable for all the devs, is it? Because the community is quite small, the devs are quite indie in a lot of these cases, and they can't really afford to go free to play.
Yeah,
and also that's one of those bad words now in the overall gaming community. Oh god, we've been talking about this all week, guys. There are certain things that have stigmas related to them. Early access is one, which early access used to be a pretty cool thing, but there have been enough spectacular failures or just outright frauds that now when people hear early access, their brain just turns off, just la 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 la. Okay, I don't care. Free to play, that's another one. It used to be like, oh cool, so I don't have to pay for it, cool. But now there's kind of a backlash to that because people feel like they're going to be nickeled and dimed to death, or that in practice, I know that, well, I can say personally on something like Tribes Ascend, I spent a lot more on it than I would have if it were just a $50, $60 box title, just on the microtransactions and, the in-game gold and whatnot. But there are a lot of good things about it because it gives you a bigger player base, and of course we see that a lot with that. I mean, the number one thing right now is MOBAs, it's lane pushers, and most of those are free to play, and so you've got a bigger community from which to draw. But yeah, there's also kind of that sort of backlash going on with the idea of free to play as well. One thing about Arena FPS too is that you have the people that say you need a barrier to entry or else you're going to have more cheaters. Like some people talk about Counter-Strike that way. They are glad that CSGO has a $15 price point because it means that if you're just going to get VAC banned, then you've got to go pay another $15. You can't just make another free account and cheat again. I don't know how much that really matters or not, but that's one of the things that people say perception-wise.
Yeah, I don't think it's the case that free-to-play is bad. I think it's bad free-to-play is bad.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always the argument of like trying to get money for the developers, because at the end of the day, the more money the developers get, the more money they can pump back into the projects and produce better game features for the players. So I really want the developers to be getting as rich of these games as possible. On the other hand, you don't want to be putting in free-to-play aspects which unbalance the game in any way. And it's really hard to do. I mean, some interesting ideas from Rats Instigate is when you kill someone, you can unlock different death animations for the person who's been killed. So one of them is they blow up into like this big balloon and pop. And that kind of thing, it doesn't have any effect on gameplay because you're dead. I think that could be things like that. I think there's a lot of things that haven't been explored, and all the games seem to be just going for like these microtransactions of hats right now. And I think there's other avenues.
Yeah, UT4's already looking at hats, isn't that?
Mm-hmm.
and it's the case that because this genre has so many people in it that are so opinionated and hardcore, for want of a better word, there's a lot less things that you can actually adjust in the game. There's a lot less things that you can make people pay for, or restrict, or have changing, if people like cosmetics and stuff like that.
I think there's possibly more than people think. It just hasn't been explored yet. I mean, these payment models in Arena FPS games, or games in general, are way ahead of every other industry in the planet. Like free-to-play is being now incorporated into other industries. And it was really kind of the gaming scene that trailblazed that. The same with like subscription models and stuff. Like a lot of research is being done into how like we can take free to play and things like that from the gaming scene and put into like manufacturing and those kind of things, and kind of play with payment systems in the wider real world. So I think there's a lot of kind of exploration to be done, and there shouldn't ever be like the backlash of thing free to play is bad categorically, because it really isn't.
Yeah, because it works so well on humans. I mean, there was Mr. B.F. Skinner that sort of lined all that out. And then there were, I know that the Blizzard guys did, or looked at a study of Las Vegas betting that was based on that. You know, how long will you sit there and press the button hoping that you'll get the mouse treat or whatever. But talking about Unreal Tournament, I think that their case is very unique in that they see the game as sort of a loss leader. You know, they make the game free to play, but really it's meant to drive people towards the Unreal Engine, which personally I think is the best product on the market for what it is and for what they're, you know, charging. I mean, you know, $20 for something, to access to something like this. It's no accident that a lot of the new games, in fact, if you listen to the FPSZ podcast, you know, all the games that we were working on that were people who were guests on the show, they're all being made in the Unreal Engine. But so it's good for them to make the game free, because then if you want to make maps and stuff, and this will be the same with hashtag Rect, you know, if you have the Unreal Engine, you can make the maps. Now, as far as our payment model, we're probably looking at something like what you're seeing with your rats and your reflex and your Wickland, you know, where it's a very low, reasonable price, and so that satisfies the whole Counter-Strike thing we were talking about. But you know, you also, you're not paying this huge amount for something that I'm seeing kind of a backlash on that too. You know, things like Titanfall and Evolve, which are mostly multiplayer based games, and people are just, wow, this is a lot of money for this stuff, guys.
Yeah, I mean, $60 for a game that people play for maybe a week, like, it's just a lot of money for not a great deal of value.
I can only think of two of the sort of major games coming out that are actually going to be free to play, and that's UT4 and Reborn. Everything else is going with the model that you mentioned, Winters, which is just paying £5 or so. You know, it's something quite reasonable.
Do you think that's because like developers kind of the smaller developers don't have the same cash flow? These, like, for you, Rect isn't a loss leader. It's like your source of income in one sense. And by getting that $5 initially, it means you'll kind of get a more upfront fee rather than trying to gambling on a free-to-play model, which might not pay off in the future.
That's there's probably a lot of truth to that, and I know that. I mean, hashtag Rect is very much a labor of love. We're not getting paid for it currently. I mean, everybody is doing it while doing other things. So, you know, any revenue we get based on that is going back to funding, you know, further development of product, content for that as well as other games, and we have a whole list of games we want to make. So that every little bit helps on things like that. But yeah, it is kind of situational. I think you're right. And then because you look at something like Reborn, I mean, you guys said there were like 700 people watching just now while Too Good shows off concept art of a rocket launcher and just says there will be robots, or whatever.
Yeah.
And he has a built-in sort of player base already, so that will drive a lot of that for him, based on name recognition alone. So he's in another unique position to be able to kind of work with that, I think.
And he's got a company as well, which is funding the project. Is it the good show or something?
Yeah,
or?
I don't know if the Good Studio is actually funding the project. I think it's purely Too Good.
But, I mean,
I don't think.
Even if they're not directly
right,
funding.
He did partner with somebody that makes like primarily mobile games.
Yeah, he partnered with Taloa, which is a Swedish mobile game company. And they're jumping on board to do the. I don't think they're doing anything financially for the project, but they're doing art stuff.
That's cool.
So I don't know if they're doing concept art. I think they're doing the 3D models. This is a guess that they're doing the 3D models and not the concept art, but it's the art side of things. He's got a programmer working with him called Firefrog. Not his birth name, I'm sure.
Might be. Never know.
His mama didn't name him Firefrog.
And he seems to be a pretty talented guy, and he's doing when the alpha first came out, he was banging out patches and amends and stuff really quickly. So he seems to know his stuff.
Well, they've built their own game engine, which I don't think many of the other developers have done, have they? I think a lot of people use.
Reflex has got their own engine.
Oh, okay.
Reflex does.
I don't know who else.
Is Telos its own engine?
Played Rack. That's a single player, but it's a very cool game. Brad Carney spent something like we got to speak with Brad Carney at a couple of conventions, and I think he spent 6 years building that from scratch. You talk about a labor of love, man. But and it's a wonderful game, and it somehow is getting overlooked. It's very similar to things like you see Strafe. Has gotten a lot of press lately. Although I don't know if they're going to make their nut on the Kickstarter. They're
no, I think they need like 40k more, don't they?
Yeah, check out Strafe, guys. It looks
really talking
fun.
about revenue streams. Kickstarter may be another one of those things where the things that have preceded them, whether it's fair or not, may have sort of muddied the waters for worthy projects that are coming afterwards. Because I see things, like Strafe, Reflex for that matter. I mean, they're much lesser games than Reflex that did not make their that did make their Kickstarter handily. But now, people seem to be a little more gun shy about those sorts of, again, it's sort of like early access, these investments in things that may or may not play out. That's why we're even hesitant. I mean, we were going to try to roll out a Steam Greenlight campaign a few weeks ago, but then we're just like, let's wait till we get a little bit more content and, another build or two under our belts to where people feel a little more confidence in, wow, this is almost a complete polished product now. And so they feel more, that's more just for our own, I guess, sense of how we feel about it. But, it is based on community perception as well.
I think Kickstarter's a bit of a lost cause these days. It had its heyday, and there's been so many high-profile flops that it's just the faith and trust in the platform's kind of just gone away, which is a shame because it was a really good concept. But I mean, I don't think it's impossible now to get funded, but it's so much more difficult. And if I was going to do it, I'll set a really low target and just use it for marketing purposes rather than use it for actual funding purposes.
Yeah, start low and have a lot of cool stretch.
Yeah, just do stretch goals. Shall we move on to another thing that was brought up quite a lot in those threads, which was game modes. And there was a lot of hype for, I think, was it Assault or Onslaught? I always get the two mixed up.
Yeah, just generally the more casual game modes. So, how can the game modes influence appealing to the wider audience of gamers out there? And I think it's quite clear that the majority of the casual gamers aren't going to be that interested in playing Duel.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think it's the case where you want to get 1 million people in playing whatever game type they want, and because of that you'll have a few hundred, maybe a few thousand playing Duel. I think that's the aim. I don't think you aim for everyone to be playing that most hardcore game type. I don't think you can expect that to happen.
No.
What's it like in StarCraft? Because I don't know anything about StarCraft, but do the majority of people play 1v1?
Yeah, that's the kind of like headline, and there's a lot of complaints about that, and a lot of people are saying that's the reason why StarCraft 2 has kind of fallen foul of losing its player base. I think more people watch it now than actually play it. Where StarCraft Brood War, the kind of custom game scene was a lot bigger and a lot more pushed through the client, whereas in StarCraft 2 it's kind of the 1v1 play now ranked ladder thing is the kind of headline.
Yeah, I think team games are definitely the way forward. I mean, that's one of the reasons that MOBAs took off as much as that. It's less pressure, for one thing, if you want to. It's like, if we win, it's because I carried. If we lose, it's because my team sucked. That's what we like to say.
Yeah, definitely.
But you're going to have to see a movement towards that. I know there was a ES Reality thread that was hotly debated about this, where people were saying that the insistence on Duel was what might have dragged Quake down. I don't know. I think Quake is basically the type of game that lended itself well to duels, and in its heyday, we saw so many great duels that I don't know if that's a whole nother discussion altogether, I think. But I know that with #Rect, we are really focusing on team modes, including, without going into it too much, there's a few modes that we have in mind that I kind of insist that we have to have some casual, quote-unquote, I hate the word casual, but okay, modes where maybe your fragging ability isn't necessarily what makes you a great player. There's ways that you can contribute without being, called upon to make the sickest shots or whatever. And then, in playing those, you will get better at shooting, and therefore you will feel more confident about doing things like more duel-based and deathmatch-based modes. And we'll also have RP mode, which people thought I was kidding about that, but I'm not. Where, basically the guns are turned off and you can role play.
Oh, cool. Why not? I think there's like an interesting idea from Reborn where they're doing they're going to do defrag first, which I think defrag's a tool that's really good for teaching people how to kind of get the movement down, and movement is such a large part of Arena FPS shooters that oh my god. That
we'll let that one slide.
We'll let that one slide. So ATM machine. Anyway, it's movement's such a large part that you're not going to get anywhere in a deathmatch game or even a duel game without the movement down. So I think kind of pushing the defrag game mode, even though a lot of people don't like it, I think is a good idea. And also he's talking about the robot, like the 2v2 where you played like a little shoulder robot. So if you kind of dueled with, like paired up with a really good player, you could kind of learn the pathing and kind of the mistakes like the way he's playing the game, the way he's controlling the game, but you're just kind of like sitting on his shoulder, kind of doing activated skills, which is a lot lower skill cap. And I think that could be a good way. I don't know if
he's still planning to do that or not.
I really hope so, because that was one of the most interesting game modes I saw.
Yeah, I was most interested by the fact that he just seemed to be coming up with cool ideas.
Yeah.
It wasn't the idea necessarily that had me hooked. But I think it's really important that there's something there that will hook, because this is where Wickland's having a problem now. Wickland is dual only.
Yeah.
And there's
and
such
the
a small amount
numbers
of
are
people.
just scary. For as good a game as it is, it really should have more players, but I don't know if it's just that people are not into the emphasis on dual. I think that the landscape of gaming has changed a lot in the past decade, though, too, and that is reflected in stuff like that.
No, I agree. But I think, like, it's really difficult. You don't want to, like, kind of forget about the dual game modes and kind of not focus on them at all. I kind of feel like you should. The way I'd envision it, you have, if you had a client open, you'd have like the dual game mode, kind of maybe a Twitch stream or something on the client, and you could kind of watch other people play dual, whereas kind of the game modes that it was pushing you to actually play would be kind of the more casual ones or the more accessible ones. So it's kind of like still kind of pushing the hardcore game modes on you, but from more a spectator perspective. I think, isn't that what Dota 2 does?
Well, that's what #React will be doing, so I like what you're saying there. I'll say no more than that. I don't want to get all Peter Molyneux and start talking about super promises and stuff, but yeah, that's kind of one of the things we have in mind. I'm curious as to something, to you guys' thoughts on this. Is it possible to have too many game modes? Because I hear this from people also, is that, you don't want to give people too many choices, because then you dilute the player base because people like one or the other. But to me, it seems like you put out as many solid game modes as you can within reason, and then the community gravitates towards something.
I think there's two. Sorry, carry on.
Sorry, if you look at Quake Live, there's not an awful lot of people playing the extra sort of tacked-on game modes. The most people are playing dual, CTF, Clan Arena. Not many people. Yeah, so I think if you were to bring out a game that had dual, CTF, TDM, Clan Arena, you'd quite easily find a game in each of those game types. I think the more you add, the harder it's going to be, but then maybe the more you add, I don't know, it's a double-edged sword, but it's one of those things where giving more to the community pleases the community and keeps more people playing your game. So that's a long set of sentences where I basically said nothing.
My thoughts on it is that UT and UT 2004 did a really good thing with mutators, and giving players more options to how they want to play the game. Even though they're not playing the dual modes, the more people in the game, the more visibility that game's going to get. And the more visibility that game's going to get, the more people that would be into game modes are going to find that game and be like, oh, that game looks good. Let's get in that. So I think really, like, you should be as scattershot as possible with trying to try different crazy game modes, because even you might get 100 people which just want to play the casual game modes, but if you get one or two that want to play the dual game modes, which kind of the developers are probably more interested in themselves, that's advantageous for everyone involved. And also,
yeah, I have to agree, man, because that's kind of what we're looking at as far as the mutator system was a good one. So I know that when we start discussing potential game modes, there are, is this more of a mutator type of thing, or is this a full game mode type of thing? And then that gives you a lot of play in what you can do with a game mode, is having different ways to, alter how that is played.
I think quite a good example is League of Legends, where really, although it's the same game mode, 5v5 pre-made at a high level is a completely different type of game than random 5v5. But the tactics, everything's just completely different. And there's not that many people wanting to play 5v5 pre-mades like a high competitive level. There's literally millions of people wanting to play, kind of just jump into a game and play with 10 random people. So it's really kind of the masses supporting the few, like the large player base supporting the competitive player base through money and through just sheer numbers of people interested. What do you think about that? Anyone?
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't know? What are you... This thoughts going on.
Sorry, I was on another tab. Sorry.
Not even paying attention. Unbelievable.
No, I was reading through the thread that we're talking about.
Ah, okay. That's alright. Head in the game, Neeple. Head in the game.
Yeah, my bad.
Shall we move on?
Yeah, do you want to talk about genre hype?
Genre hype.
Because
this is
very relevant to what's going on right now.
a bit of a nebulous term, but the way I define genre hype is kind of, I think we were talking about earlier in the pre-show, how when there's multiple games doing well, or even multiple games with hype, they kind of support each other. And two really good examples is UT versus Quake 3. Back in '99, where each game was kind of like competing with each other, but it was like kind of Atari versus Nintendo, Nintendo versus Sega, and Sony versus PlayStation. When there's competitive aspect between the platforms, it draws players into it. What do you think about that?
I think there's so much going on in Arena FPS right now that in 2016 it's going to be hard for the wider audience of players and people that aren't in the genre to not notice it. I think there's so many games coming out. There'll be so many, debut tournaments and people arguing over which one's better when they're actually properly created games. That it's just there's going to be so much hype around Arena FPS that people are going to start looking at it.
Absolutely, man. And what I saw the thread on our Arena FPS from the Project Next guys, and one of those guys, among the many things he said that I will not go into, he did say that when they started working on Project Next, they had no idea that all these other projects were going to spring up and that were similar in, if not style or content, then certainly in intent. And I know that that was very true for us as well. The impetus behind making something like #Rect was we wanted a cool arena shooter that we could play, just our friends and stuff. And because there wasn't really much out there as far as new games that was scratching that itch. So, and then all of a sudden, a lot of people were feeling the same way, which I take as a good sign. It tells me that a lot of people are kind of thinking along similar lines, and I think that the appeal of these games is definitely there, and that there's certainly room for a lot more of these kind of games. I mean, how many MOBA type of games, you guys alluded to this earlier, there are a lot of them out there, and they serve different needs. Some people prefer to control their character like a third person, like Smite, and that's a different experience than your League of Legends, and something like Awesome Knots and things like that. There's a lot of room for different games within a genre, and yeah, I think you're right, man, that we're heading towards a potential renaissance era for these types of shooter games. We've had the slowed down tactical hide and camp AD strafe kind of game, the military sim type of game be kind of on top for a while now, and it took away from the crazy flying around bouncy, abandon all realism and just have fun, in a shooty arena shooter game. That's sort of fallen out of style, and now I think it's coming back. I think with the PC that helps a lot too, that a lot of people are going back more towards PC gaming. I think when you start trying to do this stuff with a controller, it's a little different, and so you have to, by necessity, make things that are a little bit different, a slower pace.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
I think that's just one of several things that is kind of aligning cosmically, I guess, to make these things more attractive to a larger audience. And yeah, I truly believe that, and I'm excited about all the guys. I don't see any of these other games as competition. I'm like, you go, girl. You know, let's all make these things. You know.
I think
What you said about the other games, there being more room for different games in a genre, is it's exactly what's happening now. Is we've got games that are like UT, we've got games that are like Quake, we've got games that are completely new. There's a game to scratch every itch that people could have.
Yeah,
some people
definitely.
might think that's oversaturation, some people might think it's providing variety, but
And
it's
and to be frank, I mean, like, I think like some games are gonna do better than others, and that's just, you know, the nature of reality. Like, with this many games in development, some are gonna flop and some are gonna carry on and do really well. But I think by supporting and kind of like cultivating the community to have interest in all of the games, you give all of them like the best chance they can get. An interesting point you just brought up was about kind of modern military shooter, and if we look at the two kind of quite big releases in that kind of genre, like Titanfall and the newest Call of Duty, they both have not quite Arena FPS movement. It's more parkour style, but it's no longer kind of the static kind of strafey kind of crouch.
Yeah, it's leaning more towards that kind of
Yeah.
free movement, isn't it? Yeah.
And it definitely, that to me indicates there's a lot of appetite for more movement focused games, and hopefully that's gonna, because the problem is, I think that it doesn't really work in that kind of game. In the new Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, you still got all these kind of hit scan weapons, so there's no projectile weapons really. So you've got this fast kind of jumpy movement, and at the same time you've got the same old weapons, and it's kind of a bridge between a modern military shooter and Arena FPS, but it's that bridge needs to be capped by projectile weapons. And I think when people see kind of the advantage of a projectile, like a rocket launcher or the plasma gun, over kind of like another AK-47 gun, then that'll kind of bring them full circle back to good old 1999 arena shooters. I'm excited. I think there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of good games in development.
Halo
Yeah.
did it as well, didn't they? Halo's going for the more mobile,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they've got
fast
jetpacks
jumping around,
and
so
yeah.
it shows that there's more interest in that sort of game. Maybe eventually the crowds are going to want the most movementy sort of game they can get after getting a little taste of it in COD and Halo and stuff, and they'll be jumping on Reborn or whatever it is, or Reflex, or hashtag Rec or
Well,
whatever.
and to address the thing about whether any one game is going to get popular or not, really all you can do is just try to build a decent community, you know, through the tools that you have. I mean, I'm not going to rule out, you know, that a couple of years from now I'll be lifting a pint with you guys at the hashtag Rec tournaments at Wembley, you know, or something. But I mean, all that we can do is, you know, build a good community. We're going to be supporting our game with leagues and tournaments and, you know, play days and, you know, encouraging that sort of participation from people. And I don't know, I think it's a big enough niche that even if we've got a good solid base of players, that makes me happy. And because I see that's another one of those things that comes up. Well, we need to just figure out which one of these games is going to be big and have everybody get behind that. You know, it's like, well, let's just all eat at McDonald's, right? Because it's the biggest
I don't think that's
restaurant in the
possible.
world, right? That seems sort of short-sighted to me to think that way. But, you know, people want to back a winner or whatever, and I understand that. But really, right now, it's just about getting these games shipped, which is, as we've seen, not always easy. You know, I can say that we're very dedicated to making sure our game gets out. That is priority number one, and from there, we build upon that. But I think there's room for all of these games to have a community, whether they're of, a League of Legends size or not. I don't think that success should be defined by, can we be as big as Riot? That's how many MMOs died on the altar of, let's just try to be as big as World of Warcraft. Whereas, there are several of them that have thrived over the years by just building a good, strong, dedicated, if not as huge as that, a good community.
That's how it was before people were making all these new games. Quake World had its community, Quake 2 had its community, Xonotic, Warsaw. They all had their little pockets of the little Warsaw family or Xonotic family, whatever it was. So it's still a target I think people in the genre aim for.
I think the challenge is having all those sub-communities, but housing them in one larger community. And I'm not sure how that's possible. I've got a couple of ideas, but I think it'd be really beneficial to everyone if there was, like, I don't know, a server, like a RC server, and then everyone joined that, and then it had its own little sub kind of areas for each game. Does that make sense?
I think FPS Pulse is trying to get people on the same banner. Everyone on the same page.
Yes, Zoot and the guys at FPS Pulse, yeah, definitely. And I know Greth from Project Freefall has been working with them some as well. And like I said, I am a caster. I mean, I cast shooting games. I mean, that was another one of the selfish reasons we started this project. So not only did I want to have a game to play, but I want to have a game to cast. But I will we will be supporting all these other games too. I'll be casting tournaments and stuff for anybody that is down to have that happen. So, I mean, the infrastructure is there. It may not be, as vast and far-reaching as others, but yeah, I think you guys are right, and I think a lot of us are feeling this way in the community, is that if we can kind of unite these things rather than be in a adversarial, because then you're just fighting over scraps of, well, look at the Steam charts, virtually nothing. So it behooves us all to kind of, as I said, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Some of the guys that I saw were doing combination tournaments, like a tournament of multiple games. Or
That's
they
a good
were
idea.
at least thinking of the idea of doing it, which I thought looked kind of cool. They had a Warsaw, Xonotic and Quake World tournament, I think it was. And the players would play across all games. And there's the quad damage tournament happened recently for Quake 1, Quake 2, Quake Live and Quake 4. So stuff like that's kind of nice. It kind of gets players from different games playing each other.
What do you think about having an ELO system, or like a league, which was cross-game?
I don't know if...
Is that a tenable idea?
Ooh,
I don't know if it could
cross
even be
game?
accurate.
Mm-hmm.
That would be very difficult to pull off, probably. It's hard enough to do ELO and stuff like that for even a single game. That's somebody smarter than me might be able to figure out something like that. But yeah, it's.
I mean, I don't think the technology's...
People have asked if we're going to have matchmaking, and we are going to have some form of matchmaking. I know that it is. Matchmaking really works better when you have larger numbers to throw at it. That's why it works so well in something like your Counter-Strike, where we talked about this on the FPFC podcast. You've got so many people, so therefore you can find. But if you've got 20 people playing your game, you're not really going to be able to have the most accurate matchmaking. I mean, but we are going to have a system in place. I know that that's one of those things that the current market, when we talked about how the modern face of gaming has changed, I think that's one thing that people really demand, almost some sort of matchmaking or ELO system, to where they feel like they're getting put with people of a similar skill level.
Yeah.
they definitely do nowadays. I think people expect to see matchmaking when they pick up a competitive game. I expect they expect to come into the game and be able to find a ranked game and find out what their rank is and brag about their master rank to their friends and stuff like that. I think they need that nowadays.
I think it's kind of brings us on to our last subtopic, which is approachability of the genre. I think matchmaking is definitely part of making a game approachable because it kind of segments new players a little bit away from the best players. I think it was on your stream you were saying how you want, it might have been Beyond and Real podcast actually, how you want good players in the same server as bad players because it kind of like shows the new players kind of what's possible in the game. But I think it's better to do that through having things like Twitch or even like demos embedded into the client, so you can watch these good players play but you're not being decimated by them.
Yeah, that's a interesting thing. Yeah, I'm reminded of one year at QuakeCon they had Alienware had a Tribes of Sin booth set up, and we had guys that played on pro as they got Tribes of Sin teams, and we were talking to other people who were there from other teams that recognized each other, and they would bring people up from the audience to play Tribes of Sin. So those guys all sat together so that they would be picked as a team, and they were playing against this other team. And the other team did not know that you had jetpacks and skiing.
Oh, wow.
Here's these giant Tribes of Sin maps, right? And they take off walking towards the other base. And so imagine they're surprised when they see this, big ball of people flying over them, just destroying them and moving so fast. So yeah, they were not familiar with the controls of the game. And I know that in #Rec we see a big difference between people who are coming from games where, yeah, you are staying on the ground a lot. You are AD strafing. You're hiding behind corners. You're trying to, give a small silhouette to people to shoot at. And then you see the guys, people like Death Trap, who really just spend a lot of time working on the movement, where he's just flying around and doing that. I used to, love to just watch him play, our game, and just see the ways that he would come up with to, exploit how the movement worked. And so, yeah, you want to model that sort of thing to people, I think. But, yeah, then the matchmaking thing comes in. Because back in the day, when you started out playing these games, you got your ass kicked, like a lot. And you kept going in, you kept getting beaten up, and then one day it sort of starts evening out, and you find out that you're doing a little bit of the ass kicking yourself, and then pretty soon you're, on that kind of level. But I don't know that people are willing to invest in games that way anymore.
And I don't think there's any less butt kicking.
Yeah.
It's still the same amount. But
it's even worse.
It's less likely to go through it.
Like people were good, in inverted commas, back in the early 2000s, but people are so much better now. Like the best players now are probably much better than the best players when the games first came out.
Yeah, and if you make a list of it, the genre's old. It's considered to be full of hardcore players. It currently has no games that look like they aren't from the 90s that are respected.
Mm-hmm.
Until they actually get finished. And the main game type is 1v1, or the competitive game type is 1v1. It's not an approachable genre.
Very intimidating, yes.
I think mechanically it's very approachable. It's the actual perception which makes it unapproachable. Because mechanically if you look at the amount of rules and kind of nebulous things you have to learn to be able to play League of Legends or Dota, you've got to learn all the items or the builds, all the terminology of top, mid, jungle, etc. Whereas an Arena FPS game is essentially just pick up health packs, pick up weapons, shoot things. And there's a lot more nuance below that, but at a very base level, I think anyone could understand and kind of get into it. Do you agree?
I think it's the difference between, I think with a MOBA people think, I can eventually learn all these things, whereas with an FPS game, or an Arena FPS game, they don't think, I can get good, or I can get good enough. I think it's skill-based, rather than knowledge-based, or at least that's how they perceive it.
I guess there's
people have more confidence that they can learn everything in a MOBA than they can get good at an FPS.
I like analogies, and I'm quite into my juggling. I like to juggle. I'm quite good at juggling. But whenever I talk to someone, they're like, "Oh no, I can't learn to juggle. I'm not coordinated enough. I'm not. I couldn't do it." And the matter of the fact is, if they tried for long enough, they would be able to do it, and they would get good at it. That's how I got good. I was terrible to start off with, but now I can get 5 balls in the air and do some quite cool things. But it's an investment of time, and it's an investment of self-belief that you can learn something. And it's quite a similar situation where, at the end of the day, strafe jumping is a skill-based aspect that you've got to practice. And none of us are like perfect at it, but I think it's similar that it looks like it's this big, massive mountain to climb, and people they give up at the base camp.
So you got to provide enough things to make people stick around long enough to do that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
just like
and one of the things that we're doing is we've been talking a lot more about fleshing out a single-player experience for the game. Not necessarily a campaign. I'm not really interested in scripted jump scares and whatnot, but something, your co-op and single-player things, kind of like your painkiller and things like that, your horde modes and stuff, where, there are sort of mindless things to shoot at, and then you build up confidence by playing the AI controlled stuff, and you get familiarized with the feel of the weapons and the movement, and then as you build that confidence, you maybe think, ooh, I wonder how I'd do against real people against this type of competition, and then you can feel a little bit more armed with some knowledge and skill as you go in. But yeah, and as we talked about earlier, having game modes that aren't as dependent on your just pure shooting twitchy skill, that there are ways that you can contribute to your team without necessarily being the top fragger.
I think bots is an interesting point. I think probably all of us, when we first booted up an Auton or Quake or Tribes, would have been playing versus bots. I'm not sure if Tribes has bots actually. That was a mistake. I've not played the original. But bots were like a really big part of the games back then, because first of all, we all had 56k internet. We didn't have these fast broadband connections we have these days. So people kind of learnt the games versus bots.
Yeah, I think that even that mode we tried on rats is something so simple, but it's like, because on the Wickland forums when it came out, there was so many people saying, seriously, does this game have no bots, or does it have no single player, or things like that. I think having that gives people an excuse to buy the game, even if they're not that interested or a bit intimidated by the multiplayer. And then once they've got it and they've gotten pretty good at smashing up the bots and stuff, they might get the confidence to jump in.
Yeah, so Nicole, you're absolutely right. That's one of the reasons that when we started talking about monetizing this game, which was around the time that we took it to conventions, and people were like, where can I buy this? Not where can I download it, but where can I buy this? And we started thinking, well, oh shit, we need to do some value adding, and single player, I think, is definitely part of that, or giving something to do while you're offline, or that's where the game is not entirely just a multiplayer driven experience. Also, with your indie type of games like this, you fall into that trap of, well, nobody plays it because nobody plays it. Mm-hmm. I always see this. Did you play a game called Strike Vector? That was a really cool game.
That was awesome.
But nobody plays it because nobody plays it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think AI gives an inlet, and I think what I'd like to see is a way that you could seamlessly go between AI and people. I don't know how you do that, but like playing
Like
this.
Brink?
I've not
Bad
played
example,
Brink.
Sorry.
I've not played Brink.
Although
Yes.
Dirty Bomb is awesome.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I'm waiting for that to get the second round of beta going. That I played it before it was on Steam, and that was really fun. And then when it hit Steam, I only played 30 minutes, but it was a good 30 minutes.
Yeah,
and then
those
and then it
guys
stopped being
know
available.
what they're doing. They got a bad rap with Brink, and Brink was certainly a game with flaws. But Splash Damage, I don't know if it's strictly counts as an arena shooter, but I love objective-based games, and that's another kind of where, yeah, you may not be the best shooter on your team, but you may be the guy that defuses in time. You may be the guy that takes down the wall that gets everybody through and wins the game. And Dirty Bomb is very, very well done. I think there's a lot of potential there. We'll definitely be doing some casting and stuff for that when it comes out.
Yeah, I played as the healing, and that's a perfect example of not doing much in terms of killing or anything that skillful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're killing a few people, but most of the things I was focusing on were just healing people, and that sounds like something that casual players could really latch onto. I know it's not the sort of thing you can tack onto an Arena FPS game, or is it?
Or is it?
It could be like that idea from Reborn had about having kind of the shoulder robots, I think. So you're kind of doing something, adding something to the game, but not necessarily being in the arena shooter part itself. That was a bad sentence.
Even like CTF, you know.
Yeah.
You might go 0 to 20, but if you cap 2 flags out of 3, you're the MVP.
So is this a bit like TF2, Dirty Bomb?
Sort of, yeah. It's class-based. It's class-based, but there's a lot of hit scan sort of military weapons. But there's quite some like wall running and stuff. So it's kind of a mix.
Because
it's pretty fun.
TF2 is a game that did really well, and it's still doing really well, and it's very approachable. And I think it still has a bit of a competitive scene. It's not, you know, it's not hyper competitive, but it has a competitive scene. And what do you guys think that game did right?
I think it's kind of just isolated parts of an arena shooter and split it into 9 classes, and then it's quite approachable in that you pick a class, you only have 2 quite simple weapons to worry about. There's no complex movement to worry about, and you know exactly what your class's role is. I think it's quite approachable in that way.
Yeah, and step 1, be published by Valve.
Or Blizzard.
Step 2, there are so many different roles you can play. There are 9 classes, and so no matter what your play style, whether you want to be, you know, flying around, shotgunning people with the scout, or whether you like to just push the cart with the heavy, or whether you like to be a pocket medic, or something like that, there's something that fits everybody's play style. And plus, yeah, it was just such a well done game. Just you know, the art style was like nothing that was out at the time. It was very polished experience, and you know, the making it free to play and putting the manconomy in it, and the hats and all that. That was really one of the first games to really have that sort of ridiculous success off of that, and that probably inspired a lot of the free to play movement that we saw when they switched it to free to play, and then they had all the different the economy built into it.
That's an interesting you brought up the manconomy, because I think earlier we were talking about like narrative. The narrative of Team Fortress 2 is incredibly strong. Like the Meet the Scout videos and etc. They get like millions of views, and there's that whole kind of make your own video based on their assets. I can't remember what it's called, some software. And I think that really adds to making a game approachable, kind of creating it kind of this whole narrative aspect around getting into like the world of the game. And it's spitballing here.
Yeah, I quite like those Meet the videos. Just
Yeah.
extra. I think if the games are going to want to appeal to a big audience, they're going to need to, as much as it pains me to say it, they're going to need to be flashy and fluffy.
And I don't think it's like you can make a really good game that's flashy and fluffy. And I think you can make a really hardcore like StarCraft 2. I mean, it's not quite as good as Brood War in some aspects, but it has kind of the whole Kerrigan backstory, and it has Jim Raynor, and it has these characters which kind of appeal to a mass audience, but at the same time it's a really hardcore game. Like, I think the two aren't it's not impossible to mash the two together.
Yeah, much to my shame, I actually own a copy of StarCraft 2 and StarCraft 2 Part of the Swarm purely because of cinematic trailers, and I don't like strategy games. I don't care about strategy games, but I own them because I was sucked in by esports hype and beautiful trailers and things like that.
I think Blizzard's trying to do the same thing with what's that new game, Overwatch, which is again back to the shooters. Like they're really pushing
more
the narrative
Pixar-like
and
trailers.
yeah, and like if you can make a good game out of it at the same time, then all power to you. But I think the problem is a lot of the developers don't have the budget to do that kind of stuff.
Well, I know that for Hashtag Wrecked, originally I was writing a novel based on the lore of the game, but the nature of our development process kind of inhibits that a bit, so now it's more like a collection of short stories. But yeah, there is a background and a universe it's in, and you know, we've even talked about most, if not all, of our subsequent games being kind of based in that universe because there's a lot of room to explore.
Dota 2 kind of has that. They don't necessarily have a strong continuous story, but they have like a lore for every single character, and it kind of intertwines, and it's kind of just separate stories all pieced together.
And I think if you can
so many of them,
scratch that itch of people that like lore, that's a whole large amount of people out there which wouldn't play your game if it doesn't have it. And I think that's, you know, it's an important avenue to take advantage of.
Yeah, I think we're in an age
it dovetails well with the question about how do you cast a wider net and make these things appeal to more people.
Definitely.
I don't think you can bring out a game anymore that's just a bare bones. Regardless of how good the gameplay is, I don't think you can just bring out a bare bones shooter with a server browser that is, you know, fun. I think it's got to have all this extra stuff like ranks, and it's got to have sexy trailers and cool visuals and all this extra stuff that's going to bring in people that are outside of the net, as you said.
Yeah, something that Wickland could, like, Wickland, it feels like they've got this amazing universe, but it just hasn't been explored at all. Like, the art style, the aesthetic, and, like, the different, like, creatures that you kind of take the form on. Like, if that was kind of put in the narrative of maybe kind of a medieval fantasy world, then you could really take advantage of that, but it hasn't been quite done yet.
They did a good thing by just bringing out a game that looked good, though.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
The first time you saw it, it was a polished, visually game.
So I think that kind of wraps up the all the subtopics that we wanted to discuss. We don't have any questions this week so far, but if there's anyone in chat that wants to give us any questions, I think we can tackle those with gusto. So here's your opportunity, viewers.
Yeah, I can tell you that one of the things we're working on for Hashtag Wrecked is wizardry. It's about space wizards. So
that's awesome.
There will be wizard powers in addition to the regular gun-type weapons. I know somebody asked in our Arena FPS, are there games besides Wickland that have non-gun type of, that have, you know, spells and stuff? There's that Grimoire game that looks pretty cool. Does that, but we're looking at, we're trying to kind of nail down what all the wizard powers do, but they're mostly you won't be casting magic missiles or anything like that. We're not looking at it as an offensive thing, but more of defensive type of things, area of effect type of things that, you know, just kind of augment the gunplay and just add another wrinkle to how everything plays.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, I like the idea of because Too Good showed some ideas where you could like fire this little pillar that would stun enemies and things like that. I like the idea of chucking in they're almost MOBA-like elements, but chucking them into an FPS where it's skill-based in terms of casting them and things like that. Kind of like that.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of room to explore like different aspects of Arena FPS. It's an old genre, but it never really got fully explored back when it first came out, and I think now's a perfect time to explore new elements, new kind of styles, new features, new everything really. Perfect time for it.
It is, man, because the tools are so strong to do it, and you know, I sometimes kind of cringe a little bit when I see people think of Unreal Engine as just, you know, a win button. You know, oh, just press the make game button and you've made your game. You know, there's a lot to it, but again, the barrier to entry is a lot lower, and they get a lot of these things that you would have to, write from scratch are already there. There was a guy that posted in you guys' subreddit about I think his game is working title Stray, but he's probably going to change it because there's Strafe already. But a few weeks ago, he had never really even looked at Unreal Engine, and he's got a working prototype going now, and he's put out a couple of videos. And so there's, for your punters, your hobbyists or whatever, you've got a lot more room to do things when you have things like Unreal Engine, when you have things like Unity and these infrastructures that allow you to kind of pull in your ideas and make games. So I think that alone really sort of increases the playing field of what is possible, because there are less limits to what you can imagine and what you can actually put into a game.
I really liked the ideas that guy had for his game as well. It was cool to see how much progress he'd done in such a short amount of time for basically just a hobby project. Yeah,
and I think like making small games, like even if you never really complete them, it's a really good learning process for the person, and also that kind of, because it's under the same engine as all the other games, it might end up being part of a mod of a different game, like a full conversion or something. So I think kind of going in and exploring and testing and playing with this really cool software. Sounds like we're selling it now.
Give you a lot more respect for the people that do. I know that just the process of making #Rect has given me a lot more respect for anybody that releases a game. You know, even if it's not necessarily an objectively good game, if you got it out there, I mean, I salute you, because it is hard. We're seeing it already. We're seeing the struggles of some of these projects that people thought were a lock. You know, oh yeah, this is going to be a game that I will be playing, and then, you know, now some of those games are kind of in question as to whether they will be made at all or how long the development process will be. It's easy to get started, but yeah, finishing up is a difficult road. So I mean, that's another thing that when we're talking about all these projects in Arena FPS that are coming out, there is some attrition that's going to take place, and you know, not all of those games are going to make it to the finish line. Some will, just from sheer willpower. I mean, we've got enough done on ours that we're just kind of like, no, by God, we're gonna, this thing's gonna get finished. I mean, it may not be, you know, the greatest game ever made, but it'll be solid, and it'll be complete, and it will be a real game. And
yeah, I think
that alone is a tough road.
There's going to be a lot less games finished than what we're seeing now. I'm really interested to see what everything's going to look like in a year's time.
Definitely. So I think that kind of wraps up everything we wanted to talk about this week. I've been Galangua. This has been Mr. Neeple.
Mr. Neeple.
Mr.
Sorry,
Neeple.
you said
Mr. Neeple.
Mr. Neeple. And the indomitable Winters. I like that word.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it. I've been wanting to talk to you guys for a while about this stuff, and so there's a lot to cover, and I think that the future is bright for this stuff. People can find out more about #Wrecked at helllegitgames.com. You can follow us on Twitter at helllegitgames. You can download the game. There are servers up. You can play. We haven't really been publicizing it a whole lot after our last. We had a tournament. Congratulations to Critical Gaming who won that. And we'll be doing more of those coming up very soon, probably around the times of when the new builds come out, which aren't set in stone, but it tends to be, I don't know, bi-monthly. We usually have new content out for people. So, but we're about to get into a cycle where we will have more public-facing content. Right now, a lot of unsexy building work is going on, but that's the foundation for the things that will become more public builds, and so we hope that people will keep up with us, because we've got a lot of interesting things lined up, and not only us, but a lot of these other games. And so I appreciate you guys not only for having me on, but for covering these games and for giving an outlet for people to talk about them and anticipate them. I mean, I think that's just as important as the games themselves, is having, you know, somewhere where we can kind of congregate and watch the development of these things and how they grow. So thank you guys very much.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, the FPS Ed guys are doing the same thing, which you can find at /r/FPS Ed.
Yeah, and check out that podcast.
Out,
Absolutely, yeah.
It's really good.
We just did that podcast, and yeah, it was a lot of fun discussion there, and a lot of it was about Arena FPS. So yes, it might be of interest to people who are interested in these things as well.
The more people talking about it, the better.
Alright, so we're going to end there, take a bit of a break, and then we might jump into a game in about 15 minutes time, have a bit of a play, and then yeah, feel free to watch that. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll have some more content for you very soon. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Good night.